probably the key thing about the Aborigines is that they're a caring, sharing people. And if we go back, way back, and they consider themselves the first people, the other first people think of them as the first of the first people. The essence of the Aboriginal family was it was a family. If you can imagine somebody in the center of the desert all alone, they were really tight, if you will. To be away from the family was to die. My view of the essential Aborigine is a family sitting around a campfire discussing what's next. And maybe it's we've got to move because there's no water here. And they would get a view of everybody in the family, same feller. And then they'd get a decision from the head of the family, different feller. And that's the essential Aboriginal. He's a member of a family, and he's got a role, a distinct and important role, no matter what the age, in that family. The sad, sad, sad plight of the Aborigine today in Australia is the Aboriginal family has been decimated over a 200-year period since what they call the occupation, but since the arrival of Captain Cook. In the early 80s, the furthest thing that I had in my mind was to be a missionary. However, Dr. Coley at Gordon Conwell recommended that since I had a missionary instinct, I could very well be a missionary to business people, to men, which I did and loved. In 1985, my church gave me every incentive to go with them to Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and I saw that I had all of the training, all of the gifts to be a missionary, but thought I'd do that when I retired. I was then 44. So I avoided a call to mission unknowingly until 1990, when my mentor from Gordon Conwell, Christy Wilson, said, "Why not missions?" And I responded, "I haven't got time," typical American male response. And he said, do you know the Holy Spirit? Do you have the Holy Spirit? And I was taken aback. I thought it was obvious. And I said, yes. And he says, well, do you know Acts 1:8? And I said, yes, but I was a little taken aback, and it took me a couple seconds. And I said, you shall receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. And he said, stop it there, Fred. And he was a kindly gent. He was being a bit direct with me. And he then gave me a sermon on the fact that power meant like dynamite, explosive, the ability to speak in any tongue, the ability to go forth in mission. And I suddenly realized I'd been holding back on the Lord that I loved. I'd been avoiding a call to mission, and that brought me into deep prayer for all of that night, or most of that night. And in the midst of that prayer, I heard a voice much like yours, and it said, I want you to evangelize in Australia. And like a kid, in terror, I said, who? And the voice said, the Aborigines. And that's been the call upon my life ever since. Social scientists describe the Aboriginal culture as a fourth world culture. We all know the third world and the fact that people die from typhoid, but we don't think of that as happening within a first world nation, and that's just it. When you're got a life expectancy declining every year for the last 15 years, while the general population's life expectancy is going up every year for the last 15 years and is the second highest in the world, and you've got conditions like the third world, it's called a fourth world nation. I went totally out of obedience in 1991, the middle of 1991, stayed 3 months. Every Aboriginal that I lived with gave me a different slant on how I could fulfill my call, but the one that stood out was that I was a Christian businessman since a kid. I knew how to apply Christian principles to the formation of an enterprise. I was a Christian planner, and they asked me to come back and teach them how to take what they knew, the Bible, and use it as a basis for enterprise formation. And I did that.
Could you talk about those?
Enterprise development amongst the Aborigines is very, very, very basic, because it starts in building the family unit. Without a family unit, you don't have a family business. Without a family unit, you don't have a church. And so we start at the coalface, bringing man and woman together through prayer primarily, but through every compassionate tool that we can, every discipling tool that we can, and then help that family unit have a family business. The businesses that are typical are a cultural business, to help a person who's got painting skill to express their painting skill, a person that's a musician to express their music in a professional way, a person who's got computer skills to go on, to have a small enterprise selling used equipment, for example, and then getting into something a bit more sophisticated. But that's the basic thing. It's a creative business enterprise development, including churches. We look at a church as an enterprise and a ministry as an enterprise. A.C.T.S is a mission agency, like so many small mission organizations across North America. It is a volunteer organization that provides the basic support services to create a prayer network of 10,000 people, or approximately thousands of people across America and Australia that are praying for the Christianization of Australia, the Lordship of Christ in Australia. My wife and I have got the privilege of being in Australia most of the time, being amongst the Aborigines most of that time, and being incarnate, being right there with them, nose to nose at the cold face of life, in a compassionate ministry and a prayer ministry. And being amongst the people, we get prayer requests, which we then transmit by email most weeks when we're in the field, and by mail most months when we're in the field. We would pray that people would feel a call to help ACTS, and the key thing about any mission is prayer. At this point, we have upwards of 7,000 people praying for ACTS on a continual basis. We've got multi-racial, multi-denominational, mammoth prayer for ACTS, and we need more. And so that any way that a person could pray right now, or get into our web page or our email list or our mailing list so that they could pray with us, would be the first and foremost help. The second help is always to contribute. We are a volunteer organization. We work at a fraction of the cost of other mission organizations, but we still have real expenses. And so a way that somebody could contribute to the real expenses is by contacting our webpage or emailing me at frs@prayforacts.org. Specific ways to help is people could send in for Bibles. After prayer, I don't know of a better way of forming Christian family than giving a Bible to a new believer, or a person on the way to being discipled, or to a family. We also include with those Bibles DVDs and other materials to help those families form. Another way of helping is to go. And we have 2 trips each year which provide an easy entry to fulfill what for many is a lifetime dream, to go to Australia, but to go with a purpose, a mission purpose, to be amongst the Aborigines. There's also short-term mission opportunities or long-term mission opportunities to be part of this organization. There's also the possibility of working right where you are for example, doing computer work and being a missionary in your own home. That's the net of it, is to pray first, contribute second, and then ultimately to be amongst us with the Aborigines.